Hi there, and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light conversational series. This is just the intro to part 2 of the my second conversation with Walter Bosley. It's really quite amazing. We talk about all sorts of stuff. Antarctica and its connections, potential to Hollow Earth, or perhaps ancient civilizations, or even some sort of extraterrestrial evidence being down there. We talk about all sorts of interesting stuff in part 2. However, before we jump into that, just a little house cleaning stuff. I wanted to say, sorry for the pretty slow amount of videos or live chats that have been coming out recently. I was dealing with a family matter, and then I was on vacation. And then right when I got back from vacation, and I had this very busy work week, and at the tail end of it, I hurt my back quite badly, and I was basically out of commission this entire past last week. Barely got any sleep, as you can see from the eye bags. And I'm just now kind of recovered from that and back in the groove. And so I have completed the interview with Bibu Dev Misra. We did that during that very busy week. I managed to interview him, and so there's a part 1 and part 2, and part 1 will be coming out in about a week after this video drops. And then part 2 about a week after that. And we discussed the end of the Kali Yuga, his calculations, how he got there, why we both believe that the Sri Yukteswar Rudolf Steiner model, with all due respect to those great men, is flawed and through no fault of their own, both a mystical reason that the angels told me and also a technology information reason that Bibu Dev Misra points out. And so it's just a fascinating discussion about the yugas, and what the end of the Kali Yuga means and what's to come, and it's incredible, so watch for that. I am also, until at least the end of October, I'm still going to be doing natal and Navamsa charts for Vedic astrology, and due to the hospital matter with a family member, I'm really looking to generate some extra abundance. So if you feel called to get some guidance in life around your soul's karmas, please sign up for a natal that's 0 to 40 years. Astrology chart, and there's also the Navamsa, the second half of life, 40 plus chart. And for people who really want to go deep, since both charts matter quite a lot, there's also combined packages. I'm also launching the fall angelic magic classes. There's one that begins Thursday the 28th that has 1 spot left, and then there's another one that begins Thursday the 5th, which will have both an EU UK time zone class on that day, and also a West Coast US time zone class on that day. So there's one more East Coast angelic magic class for people who are interested in learning about the angels and working with magic that's in accordance with natural law and helping you come more into balance within yourself through working with the angels. So there's one more slot for the East Coast time on the 28th. And there's a full 5 slots for West Coast US and West Coast, or excuse me, UK and EU time zone, although that one is likely to be possibly even filled up already. I actually was on a podcast with a woman, Jennifer Curry, who was Boris Johnson's girlfriend for some period of years, which I had no idea who she was when she interviewed me. I felt quite embarrassed afterwards because she's quite an accomplished woman. She's a tech entrepreneur who was like one of the biggest movers and shakers in the UK for years and years, until sort of this Boris Johnson thing came up, and it sort of derailed that, and she's sort of rebuilding a new company. But she's quite an incredible, accomplished woman, and somehow I was on her podcast. So there's a bunch of UK, EU folks that are already going to fill it up, but there might be a spot or 2 open on that. And it is first come, first serve. So let's see, what else is there? Yeah, so that's the 2 main things. And then if you have any interest in spiritual guidance, I'm certainly available to do that, and helping people heal with trauma. Probably not super intense trauma, but if you have more moderate trauma, that's something that I help my clients with, and also just giving guidance about life in general. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, follow the links below. And without further ado, here is part 2 of my second conversation with Walter Bosley, where we talk all about 2023, the year of the UFO. Enjoy. All right. We're back, and so Walter and I were just talking off camera again, and just laughing at Walter and I have like a good rhythm, and I normally have like a skeleton of what I want to talk about, just because with a lot of my guests, the conversation doesn't flow as well as it does with Walter, and so I sort of need those touchstones to like advance the conversation. But with Walter and I, we can just flap our gums all day about this kind of stuff because we're way into it. So what we do want to get back to, trying to just get a little bit back on some of this stuff, is, Walter, what are your thoughts? You know, at the beginning of the year, like all of a sudden the Northcom combatant commander, is it Van Herk? I always get, it's Van Herk now, right? It was the
Yeah, I believe that's who it is.
Previously,
Yeah.
I can't remember. O'Shaughnessy was before, and now it's Van Herk. It went from Irish to German. And so, yeah, Van Herk comes out of out of his spider hole there in NORAD or Cheyenne Mountain, and suddenly, like, he's in front of the press, and you normally never see these guys. Like, we never saw these guys before 2020. I doubt even Daniel List could have named the people before 2020. Actually, he probably can. That was a bad example. Anyone other than Daniel List probably doesn't know who the combatant commander was before General O'Shaughnessy. But they came out, and in both cases, they kind of, especially in O'Shaughnessy's case, they were they were messing with politics, which is kind of unheard of. Generals as a general rule, don't stay away from politics just because it's risky. Because in theory, the commander in chief could fire them. Right. Yes. In practice, that pretty much never happens. I think the last time it happened that I can think of off the top of my dome was with oh God, what was the guy who had the corncob pipe and an eye shot?
MacArthur.
MacArthur is the last one I can recall who got a little too deep in politics and then got shit canned.
While he was active duty. Yeah.
While he was active duty. So you're going way back to the 50s there, or even late 40s.
World War II. He got in trouble a little bit with that in World War II, but it was mostly subsequent to that in the Korean War, right?
Right, because he also wanted to go.
He wanted to cross the Yalu River, and Truman wouldn't let him, and that's where he really got into trouble with it. But there were signs of it back during World War II. They're like, this guy.
yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because I also think there's some questionable stuff, and I don't want to derail too much here.
Right.
Stuff about Patton as well, and his death, and some of the things that Patton did, which actually ties into the whole NIMSA thing, and Patton and his forces making a beeline for that part of the Czech Republic where the Glocka was being worked on.
The technology,
very interesting. And so bring it from World War II to the present day. And Hurt comes out at the beginning of the year. They start talking about all these balloons.
Yeah.
Start saying, like the Chinese have that balloon that somehow we can't stop, that we can't deal with somehow, which just seems like really suspect to me, that they couldn't have dealt with that, and that they also didn't know before it got to the U.S. Like, it seems to me like they could have taken that out when it was over an unoccupied part of Montana or Canada. Figured out the general trajectory, and it would have been more or less safe. And so they didn't. Why? Why did they not take it out until it went over the U.S.? And then there was the reports they shot down UFOs. And again, Van Herk's right there, and he's like, oh, yeah, and oh, gosh, we had no idea. Thank goodness. I think he even mentioned the NRO, or he mentioned one of these million, kind of hidden new UFO-related parts of the Department of Defense or the National Security State. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but he said, golly, we weren't able to detect this balloon, but those plucky guys over at the new UFO office that we just put in, they wised us up, and gosh, who isn't that lucky? Just obvious bullshit. And so some people are theorizing, Walter, that part of what's occurring is that there's saber rattling and or a prelude to World War III. I don't think there's going to be a hot war of like a nuclear holocaust. Increased proxy warfare throughout the planet, I think, is borderline inevitable and very likely,
Okay.
like in Africa. I really hope the thing in Russia and Ukraine doesn't expand. I'm a little nervous with Wagner being there in Belarus, which we'll cover that a little bit later. But one of the things I noticed is that in this most recent bill, that Chucky Boy Schumer, the ever honorable fighting for the little guy, Senator Majority Leader from New York, who obviously has our best interests at heart as Americans and is in no way corrupt, he came out and said, gosh, we got to get to the bottom of this. And one of the things in his bill, which was very curious to me, was this eminent domain clause where they said, we want to go into these special access black programs that are at Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and maybe some ones we don't know the names of. And we want to take them out of that and put it into Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, and Raytheon, pickpocketing from your right pocket to put it into your left. And one of the explanations for that is that I'm of the opinion of that Luciferian faction wants to eventually tightly controlled roll out some of this ultra tech and perhaps even reveal this, other human presence or other extraterrestrials as part of perhaps trade or moving us off planet. In fact, I know that's one of the things that group wants. But from the point of view of the old guard, they are wanting to bring this out perhaps because they want to start mass producing these vehicles and this technology. And that part of this this UFO flap might be, one way you can look at it that's more mundane is that it's a flex on Russia and China. We have the tech, but now we're going to make it en masse.
Right.
So what do you think about this flap and what I just said about the World War III risk?
I've usually been of the mind that we've been moving closer to what would potentially be a hot war. But it would stop short of that. It would be one of those things where, okay, we've got the upper hand, let's not take this hot. Let's just, somebody capitulate to the other. And you could, okay, for instance, the balloons. Now, if the origin of these balloons was China, their military, it was my impression, my opinion from the military perspective is that they were some type of reconnaissance device.
Right.
Okay. Now, jumping over to the world of when you investigate and you're involved with intelligence collections on counterterrorism operations, which I was for a number of years of my career globally, there's this dangerous point that you're at where when you see known terrorist group members, suspects and stuff, out clearly conducting pre-operational activity, right? Like testing routes that they're driving or walking or whatever, pre-operational activity. The scary part is, the dangerous part that you have to get more intel on as soon as possible is what stage of the operation are they? Because they do the same exact activity early on when they're just vetting a location and assessing it. They will do the same pre-op activity, okay, that they do later on right before they're ready to do the act. So in other words, the dress rehearsal looks exactly like the initial stage. So you don't always know, okay, is this just an early stage thing that we've caught early, or is it late in the game and they're getting ready to hit? So it's a very similar thing if this had been a reconnaissance device from, the Chinese military intelligence. What stage are we? Are they just doing an initial look-see to test, U.S. military, U.S. Air Force in particular response? And in the case of, I have a comment about it emerging in Montana, there's a U.S. Navy presence there, but, were they just merely testing the waters to see how the U.S. Air Force would respond to this? Was this early stage? Or at the time, remember, this is the question that I asked, is this the stage because it's so overt, right? Is this the stage right before there's some type of attack? And I'm pretty sure that was going through their minds, the people in the military dealing with this. So that was my concern. Wow, are they getting ready to maybe? I would think the first hit would be, like a lot of people, hit would be an EMP strike, that kind of thing.
Right.
But the other part of this, like I said, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was this balloon emerged. It was in Montana before, reportedly. It was like, oh, look at this. There's this balloon. And it was in the skies over Montana, right?
Yeah, which in particular is over one of the, it seems, nuclear bases up there. Like,
yeah, it was near. It was a facility that was, and that's logical that if it,
right.
they would notice, hey, what's in the sky over us? But here's the thing: if it was us playing games, then it would emerging in Montana skies, particularly near an installation, would also make sense. So obviously we didn't have an attack yet from the Chinese. So now you got to wonder, okay, what sort of game is this? And I'm not the only person. There were people out there expressing, what kind of game was going on here, what kind of narrative was being pushed with this thing. Because it was, the nature of it was kind of overt. It was kind of, there's other ways. It was pointed out there's other ways that, yes, Chinese could have used their satellites to get certain things, but satellites wouldn't give them any data on an actual military response, specifically Air Force. So it still could have been an early, test that Chinese military was doing, and of course they're denying it, and our people, would obfuscate the whole thing. But it could have been something of our own, and there was some other objective for doing that operation.
Yeah, it's curious. And what do you think about this weird thing of where, I mean, I might be wrong about this, and it could be these SAPs are in defense contractors I've never heard of that are in no way related to the big overt ones like Northrop Grumman and Raytheon or whatever.
Right.
If that's the case, then that's curious, because then it's like, right, like I don't actually know, and I'm not sure anyone does who doesn't have like extraordinary clearance or works on those projects directly. I don't know under whose private contractor purview these projects, this UFO file, as Daniel Liz calls it, ultra tech as I call it. I don't know under whose purview it happens under. It wouldn't surprise me to find out that it's some completely unrelated defense contractor that's owned by some ultra wealthy people, perhaps in Europe or God knows what. But if it's being pulled out of those projects and moved to Northrop Grumman and Raytheon, it seems like one of two things is going on. They're ready to move this tech out, perhaps for war, or Daniel Liz on Dark Journalist talks about how Trump and Space Force were trying to pull the UFO file back from the CIA's grasp and into the military. Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and so forth basically are the military in a lot of ways. Like there's not a lot of like non-overlap. Like the Venn diagram looks an awful lot like a single circle, right? Yeah. And so is it possible that those special access programs are controlled by the intelligence apparatus that, in my opinion, is globalist in nature, and that the nationalists are making a push to pull it in? That seems odd to me and unlikely, simply because why would Schumer go along with that? Because he seems clearly in that globalist wing. But like, it's just so weird, this eminent domain thing. Like, are they doing what I said, where they're just taking it, and Northrop Grumman and Raytheon already have it, and they're just moving it out of the black projects to get yet even more absurd funding, doubtless, to like start assembly lining these things? I mean, one of the things is, my understanding is that there's not a lot of these vehicles, mostly because in order to construct them and keep it clandestine and compartmentalized, by that very nature, you can't mass produce it. Plus, the R&D part is prohibitively expensive, hence the missing, Catherine Austin Fitts is missing, what, 40, 50 trillion, whatever.
23, I think it's 23 trillion or 2.3 or something. I can't remember.
23 trillion, 40 trillion. Pretty soon you're talking about real money, Walter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're starting with real money. One of the here's why I again tell people, people are stomping their feet and demanding the U.S. government, give them disclosure. And, I've said that it's the aliens themselves, so to speak, that control disclosure. But I think as far as the technology and stuff like that, and the knowledge of extraterrestrials goes, again, demanding it of the government, they're digging in the wrong place. Here's the thing. Back during, the World War II era, at the end of the World War II era, the military and the government learned, hey, wait a minute. The government, if forced, can be made to disclose certain things. Okay. But private companies are not constitutionally required to tell the public anything.
Right.
And so they learned, wait a minute, we'll set up a contractor, or we'll go to this private company. We'll say, you are going to be the custodian of what we know about extraterrestrials. And so then when the people start doing FOIA demands and things like that, the government has culpable deniability. It's like, oh, we don't have any of that stuff. And, and that could be the truth. It's Northrop or Grumman or whoever, Wackenhut, or Rand or whoever, like you say, a company we've never even heard of publicly, they could be the ones that have the UFO file, and they're not compelled by the government to share anything with the public. Now, I want to caveat that too. We're not like England. The UK has a 50-year rule on classified items. And I was in this business for 20 years dealing with classified information, and I double checked it when I wrote this a few years ago and reported this a few years ago. It still stands the same. The United States does not have any kind of time limit on that. When something is classified by a classification authority in the United States, it stays classified indefinitely until it is consciously declassified. There is no 50-year rule in the United States. There's a lot of people who think there is. No. So Uncle Sam could have the stuff, the UFO file, and just classify it high enough. And if you don't have a need to know that there's something classified that high, they don't even have to. They can lie. They can lie all day long. To protect that. But generally, I think one thing they do is have a private entity be the custodian of this stuff. And part of the deal in the contract is they can access it whenever they want to.
Mm-hmm.
But what the people demanding disclosure need to do is start putting the heat on the private corporations in the tech industry. The aerospace firms, they need to start putting the heat in whatever way they can in demanded of them. And I think then you'll see some interesting reaction to that. Remember, when you get closer to where the truth is when you start getting the real interesting reactions, because, oh, wait a minute, they're getting closer to the truth.
Right. They say, in our sort of field, what I would say is that Vedic astrologers, 8th house information, the hidden, the esoteric of all kinds, whether it's technology or the spiritual dimension, the closer you get, the more kind of traction you get. And I'm sure you've experienced it. The more spooks and kooks you get.
The more spooks come out of the woodwork, but also the quieter, in this case, Uncle Sam will get. Okay, because look at it this way: you talk about the year of the UFO and stuff, and there's a lot of people excited, Grush and the hearing, all that stuff. Here's the thing about how Uncle Sam handles this stuff. If you're far enough away from the truth, okay, they'll encourage that. They'll feed that. Oh, yeah, let's have a hearing. Oh, yeah, march these former military guys. Oh, put them out there. Oh, yeah, you're right, folks. We're going to go after them UFOs. We're going to find them, because you're way off mark. The moment you actually have your sights set on target, they're going to withdraw and get real quiet. And you're right. That's when the intel agencies start, really taking a closer look at you in a subtle way. okay, because you're
Kind of
getting to what they don't want revealed. But
Yeah.
as long as they're out there encouraging it, like, oh yeah, we're going to help people get to the bottom of this, this is the dog and pony show. Now there's another more cynical reason why this has been the year of the UFO where the government is concerned, and quite frankly, when you're talking about Schumer and all these hearings and all this talk about it, they are desperately trying to distract the public's attention from this weekend at Bernie's administration we got in the White House. Folks, and how bad the economy is despite their lies. You know, that's why you're getting all this attention on UFO, folks. UFOs. I hate to tell you, I'm not trying to insult anyone or hurt their feelings. I'm just telling you that's why it seems like you're getting all this that's one of the reasons why it seems like you're getting all this cooperation on UFOs from Uncle Sam, because the administration is happy to have people focusing on that. The other, and this is the darker thing, is that it is serving some type of military-industrial complex aim, which could be, as Daniel and others talk about, the false, fake, staged UFO alien invasion narrative. It doesn't, they don't even need to really fake a real invasion. They just need to have the narrative be believable for the people to say, yes, spend, do your thing. And that's, you know, that's what they're looking for, because it brings back to full circle what you asked at the beginning of this here segment that we're discussing. You know, is this saber rattling? You know, are we trying to show off to the Russians and the Chinese what we have and what we could mass produce? I think that's part of it, under the guise of, oh, golly, UFOs. I think the Tic Tac was all part of that, and all of that has been part of it. It's maneuvering for the potential of World War III.
So, couple of things, and that is a perfect segue, as you know, into like what I want to talk about next. But I just want to say that the people who administer these things, who I say, you know, one of the things that confuses people when I talk sometimes about this Luciferian and Molochians is that they work hand in glove quite often. There is this cleavage that, in my opinion, has been growing for about 600 years now, and the old guard, right, who I extend this way back thousands of years, back to the Babylonian Rodnites, you know, and the initial, right, you know, cuneiform tablets with usury, all the way back then, that group, who both by bloodline and really more by philosophy and level of consciousness, and plus the dark demonic spiritual forces they were working with, the group that I called the Molochians, they are not very clever. They're very powerful during this era of Kali Yuga, but they're not particularly clever. But Ian, look at all the sophisticated stuff you're talking about. Yes, they get that by, they act as the Mafia Don, whereas the Luciferians act as the Consigliore. They're the Robert Duvall to the, oh my gosh, how am I, Marlon Brando, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not, Marlon Brando is a genius and Godfather. I'm just talking about positional, right?
Sure, yeah.
But there's the guy who makes the final decision, and that's this Molochian group who've had their hands firmly on the levers of power for about 5,000 something years. And there's this upstart group that has cozied up to them in order to also have their hands on the lever of power,
right,
that I call this Luciferian group. And they're that second group is the one that's so sophisticated. They're very cerebral. They're the opposite. They're very cerebral. The way this one group wants everyone kept in slavery and top-down control and the bean counters, all that stuff we talked about in the first part, that group gets seduced endlessly by this Luciferian group, because they go, what if we could bring you more gold into your treasury? Well, if do this, that, and the other thing. And they go, oh, okay. And then they go, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. You know, like we need to get rid of this group. Like the Templars were bringing us in gold. We need to smash them out. Oh, there's this Renaissance. Like it seemed good for a second, but no, we don't like that. We're going to put the stomp on that. We liked the art and stuff at first because it was beautiful and made our mansion look a little bit better, or chateau look better. But we got to stomp this out now because we made a mistake here. We didn't understand the implications of letting this out. It's a bit like that the Chinese emperor who would, you know, someone would come in with the repeating crossbow in 300 BC, And the Chinese emperor, being the Molochian, would say, "Oh wow, that looks like that could do some damage. So who all knows how to make this? Well, just me and my apprentice here. Oh, that's excellent. Guards, kill that man." And then he put it in the room with the water clock and all that other stuff. That then when the communists went in there, they found that room with all those endless innovations, because the Chinese emperors were very, very smart, and they did not want that advancement at all because it's destabilizing inherently. But for whatever reason, the West, this Molochian group has kept getting tricked by the Luciferians into letting out the printing press, into the advancement of science and technologies, and then they have to stamp it out and somehow reassert control, like we mentioned, through the Royal Society, and take back over. So I see these two groups as coming to a head. And I think that that is going to be what we're going to witness, is the technocrats and these technologists and people who are, I don't know, sort of libertarian capitalists versus the Molochian enslavement mentality, crush human dignity. This other group, which is quite ruthless, I might add, is about to turn the corner on them. And one of the three, I often say the three flashpoints of where I think it'll go hot, and I don't mean World War III, I mean this internecine conflict among the elites going hot, is if they put down the internet, because that creates a fog of war. You and I talked about that off camera, and I've talked about this on this channel a lot, so I don't need to go into that. When they switch on the new financial system, I think that that is going to be a watershed moment. And then the third one, and these could all happen, you know, simultaneously or one right after another. Any one of these could cause it, but it might also be the culmination of all three being switched on. The third one is this fake alien invasion. As I mentioned before we started, I'm of the opinion what just happened in Russia with Wagner was there was an attempted coup against Putin by Western forces. They used that general who was, I don't know his name, but the general who attacked Wagner with a rocket strike, which is a very clumsy rocket strike. It wasn't one of these hypersonic missiles that could have for sure taken out whatever that guy's name is.
Right, not a surgical attempt.
It was clumsy. It was clumsy. It was almost as though someone said, let's do it, but then someone else forced them to pull their punch. But it got the ball rolling. Then Wagner makes its way up seemingly towards Moscow, and then they reroute suddenly to Belarus. And now the Polish are talking about shutting down the border there. Suddenly NATO's like, wait a minute, like Wagner's now right on the border. This is concerning. So using that as a metaphor, and what I think happened there is I think there was a failed Western coup that Putin caught wind of. He worked with Wagner and said, we're going to take advantage of this. We're going to prevent the coup, but we're going to use it to stage you, Belarus, in part to defend those. They do have, the Russians have nukes in Belarus. A lot of people don't know that. And so I think it's in part to be sure to defend that. Perhaps the West was going to like try and take those out as part of a precursor to a deeper attack into Russian territory. I don't know why Wagner's there, but I believe that it was a rope-a-dope thing where the Russians tricked NATO into allowing them to move those troops without a response rapidly by faking a coup or taking advantage of the coup that was underway. So in a similar model, when a vehicle moves at 50,000 miles per hour, you don't need to stage it in the sense of you can be anywhere on Earth within 15 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. But this old guard group does have control of most of the stuff on the ground. They have control of the politics. They have control of the finance currently. They have control of the politics. They have, by and large, they have control of the finance, by and large. And they have control of like the ground forces and the legacy things like air forces, which could cause problems for this other group. The other problem that this Luciferian group has is they want to take over. But the group they're fighting against is the kind of person who, if you went into their mansion to arrest them, they would just push a button and burn the mansion down around them with themselves in it. They'll never let go of power under any circumstance, and they'll take the ball and go home. But in this case, it would be leaving the Earth a nuclear irradiated cinder. And this other group, this technologically advanced Luciferian group, they want to rule a technologically advanced global civilization, not a cinder husk. And so they have to be very careful and very surgical about what they do. And that's why I believe when the shit hits the fan, it's going to be over very quickly. Because first of all, the speed of the technologies involved, the cyber attacks, you know, surgical strike teams, plus advanced tech. And so I'm of the opinion that and this is just a theory, of course, that if and when they do actually do a faked in invasion, where the classic model is they'll do Project Bluebeam to like do force projection of make it look like it's a vast invasion, maybe have multiple mile-wide motherships, you know, and then they'll have drones and they'll have real vehicles going down, going brat, 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 blowing up buildings. That's the Molochian plan. That's that report from Iron Mountain. We failed with the pandemic. We failed with the climate change. We got to go to the third option. You know, Carol Rosen / Werner von Braun's final card, right? We got to find the final card to create that global government. And I think that when that happens, that's when that group will turn the corner, because they'll have everything they need. They'll have the financial system to replace the old one right in place, ready to go live. It's 2025 is when it goes live. They'll have they'll be able to, you know, have this fog of war of the internet going down, and they'll be able to have an excuse to do their little surgical strikes, their arrests, and their Nuremberg 2.0 dog and pony show, kangaroo court, to where, you know, they'll be able to pull out these, you know, corrupt Epstein blackmailed pedophiles, and everyone will cheer when those people are hanging from the neck, including me, I might add. And they'll then be able to use that to create a narrative of why they're the good guys. Because as I said to you offline, the first thing the CIA does when they're doing a coup in a country is they take over the media and they shut it down. And then they turn it back on and they go, guess what? It's so amazing. The good guys won again. It's amazing how whenever the media apparatus comes back in, the good guys always won. Whether it's that the CIA was defeated or the CIA won, it doesn't matter. The good guys always win because it's whoever the media. So what do you think about that possibility, Walter? I know it was a lot of info there, but where you want.
What I gravitate to, the context I put it in, you know, for simplicity's sake, is, you know, we're talking about, for instance, the von Braun, you know, the alleged von Braun statement.
It is.
I think if he made the statement, it's a different discussion. If he made the statement, I think it has been very possibly, this is my perspective, we're looking at a misinterpretation. If you look at what we're told he said, he doesn't really say that there is no alien threat. He says it will be used against us.
Yes.
Okay, it'll be used against us. He didn't really say, and when he said it's all a lie, meaning that could very well just apply to what's going to be drummed up to use against us in the name of an alien threat. So I have suspected in the last couple of years or so is that von Braun kind of, if he did make this statement, told us two things. He told us about this conspiracy to use this threat, this one world deep state maneuver, okay, while at the same time very possibly revealing that they know there's a threat out there. And I think that is just as valid of an interpretation of the von Braun statement as the other, that, oh, there is, because first of all, folks, okay, the idea that there is no threat from space, it's just not practical. I'll be nice. I'll say it's not practical, and that's different than how I usually express it, because it is so impractical that it's frustrating that you have to tell grown adults that it's impractical, because it's a vast universe. There's going to be, I believe there's intelligent, advanced, you know, civilizations out there. And you know what? They're not all going to like us. They're not all going to have our best interest in heart. Okay. And it's just impractical to think otherwise. And that's why I think the misinterpretation, what I think is the misinterpretation of the alleged von Braun statement is so popular, is because they go, see, he said there was no threat. No, he did not. If he even said that at all. So why would the deep state, the elites, want to do this fraudulent staged event? Well, it's what you said, to bring us under control, to bring us under their control, to protect their own interests, their own assets, because perhaps, this is where my speculation comes in, because perhaps they know what's on its way here and who is on its way here, and they want to be set up to be the clear masters of this world when whoever and whatever's coming arrives. These are the multiple possibilities. Whoever's coming could be good guys, could actually be, the kind of civilization that's benevolent that, we want coming to us. But it could be not that. And they could know something about the belligerent nature, okay, or malevolent nature of what's coming. And maybe they want to show some type of unified resistance. Maybe this deep state trick and bringing us all under this global thing is, in their opinion, the best way to show strength, or worse, they're ready to deal with this belligerent civilization and surrender our world to them. And they think they're setting themselves up to be in a better position of power, kind of like the foolish politicians in two movies I can think of. Well, the TV show V, if you recall, there were politicians that were just willing to just buddy up to the aliens, right? But then also in the movie Red Dawn, the original one, if you remember, the mayor of the town was going to be a politician all about it, and okay, we'll cooperate. And, we saw this in France in World War II, right? There were some that cooperated with the Nazis and they suffered for it. We're going to have people among the elite and particularly the political class. Oh my God, particularly the political class, that are just going to, be lips to ass of these beings because of what they think, and they may be ready to just sell us, the masses, out, to this coming threat. Any of these have to be considered, in my opinion. And what's a real serious bummer about it is people like us are left in the dark to try to figure out which is it, what's going on. I think they possibly know and suspect from what direction this invasion that I'm proposing is coming from. And I came to this is just my personal analysis, a speculative opinion, okay? I don't know this for sure, but back in my early days, I think my first year working for the FBI, I was married to my first wife at the time, and she had a family member that worked as a scientist for NASA. And he was associated with the Kuiper Aerial Observatory, I think is how they were, Kuiper's, Aerial Observatory. And it was a KC-135 with a couple of advanced telescopes on it, or one advanced telescope. And I got a tour, he got me on, it was at Moffett Field because I was working out of the San Jose office at the time. And I had my top secret clearance and stuff. So he got me on board for a little ground tour of the Kuiper Aerial Observatory. And it was a NASA craft, overtly. But when I was on board and he was walking me through it, he was a civilian scientist, okay? I saw nothing but military personnel on the flight crew and the technical crew. It was all military haircuts, military jumpsuits with rank on them. And so the crew on that thing, at least what I saw, was all military. And I thought that was interesting because it's overtly a NASA plane. And at that time, I honestly, at that moment, I didn't realize the extent that NASA is actually a DoD entity. A lot of people don't know that. They think there's a hard line between those two, and there's not. They're obligated to keep stuff secret at the order and insistence of DoD. Always before they're obligated to share with the public, because they are such a DoD affiliated. They're national defense. Don't fool yourself. Now, the mission of the Kuiper Observatory at that time was once a year. This is how it was explained to me. This is what I recall back in 1988. Once a year, they would have their flying mission. And that mission was always flown out of New Zealand. Okay, that was the area of that was the only area that they would work, and the night sky the night sky that you could see from that part of the world was their mission focus. And look, yes, of course they had traditional astronomical objectives, blah blah blah. The classified stuff gets buried in the practical and the other mundane stuff. But I found it interesting. A military crew, they were focused on that part of the sky. And there was this window of time each year that was best for observing that part of the sky they were observing. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I always thought it was interesting. And then a few years ago, I heard about this talk, as we hear in our community about, I guess Draco is a constellation that you can see best from if you're down in New Zealand, southern hemisphere, but that particular part of the Earth, if you're looking up at night, and people were claiming that there were stories of, contact with people from a world in that part and of the cosmos, and there's lore about it. And I got to thinking, well, what if there's something to that lore? And what if the Kuiper Observatory's real mission was to keep an eye on that part of the sky and anything that might pop up and that's coming this way? And so I've, in recent years, since I've started talking about this and putting this together, I've suggested to people, start doing a FOIA on everything that the Kuiper Aerial Observatory, this KC-135, start doing FOIA demands on all of their missions.
Wow.
And see what kind of response you get. In fact, I should, contact John Greenwald and tell him to, start, hey, I got a tip for you, the Kuiper Aerial Observatory.
Come to mind with that, Walter. One is that New Zealand's kind of reasonably close to Antarctica, and there's so much weird stuff with Antarctica.
Ding, 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 as Joseph Farrell says.
Yeah, doff of the hat, right? It's near Antarctica, and there's all those weird treaties in Antarctica that are very odd.
Yes.
Not because the Earth is flat, by the way. I just want to make sure the last two flat earthers follow my channel unsub. But there's that angle, right? And then you have Admiral Byrd.
Yeah.
Admiral Byrd's cousin was involved in the JFK assassination. He owned the book depository, as Daniel List dug up in his, basically being Gandalf in the Minas Tirith library 24/7, like Daniels want to do.
Yeah.
But there's the Antarctica angle, and I actually really want to. I need to do an Antarctica episode or 10 on this channel, because that's such a deep hole, and I actually want to talk to you about that, because I know you have some personal connection to Antarctica, actually familial connection. Is that right? Didn't you have a relative that went to Antarctica? Or something?
Oh no, I had a relative who I had a friend who some really weird stuff happened around the time he died, and some of it I personally witnessed. What I witnessed were things that turned up in his home that weren't there before he died. There was a break-in, and the way the break-in was through a window in in the bedroom, and there were other valuable things in the apartment, electronics, medicines, prescription medicines, and jewelry, and an envelope of cash that was sitting out in the open. None of these things were taken. The only thing that was taken out of the medicine was, if you're a veteran, you can get your pharmaceuticals for free if you're willing to be a test subject on a new pharmaceutical. It's kind of a program for affordability, that kind of thing. That was taken. The medicine that was prescribed as a tester medicine for this individual, that was given to him through the Veterans Hospital here, that was stolen. All the other meds were left behind, and The cash was not stolen. The jewelry was still there. And this stuff was, the jewelry box was right there in the room that they broke into. The envelope of cash was sitting there open, and then his wife, his widow, showed me, she goes, I found some things that just weren't here before. And one of them was a U.S. military, U.S. Air Force in particular, late 50s era issue parka for Arctic assignment, okay, Arctic gear. And it had the, rank strip on it that identified this individual as an officer, a major. And she was unaware that her husband had ever been an officer. And just, it was weird stuff. So I got to, years later, I asked my mentor, who outranked me like way above. And, I said, hey, what about this weird stuff? And that wasn't all of it. That's just part of it. What about this weird stuff, with guy's name was Eddie. And at first I was with the FBI at the time, and my mentor said, I'm not talking about that with you yet. Okay. So then I got into the Air Force, and I asked him again, and he said, okay, let's go for a walk. And we went for one of the classic walks we did, where it was honestly around midnight, and we're out walking around, the neighborhood, and he's telling me that Eddie had been, he was an intelligence asset. He had been for years, but back around 1959, 1960, he'd been called back onto active duty. And he'd been gone about a couple of months. And this much I got out of his widow. She said, yeah, he got called back to active duty. And then 2 months later, I get notified that he's been killed. And this was part of the story that I told my mentor. And then about 11 months after that, my phone rings, and it's him. He's obviously not dead. He comes back. He says, he told his widow, he goes, I cannot tell you anything about where I was, but I'm back, to go forward. And she said, nothing like that ever happened again. So that was part of what I asked my mentor. I go, what happened? Where was he? And when he finally told me, he said, okay, because I told him about the parka and, this stuff about being declared dead. He goes, he was sent to Antarctica. Now, remember, I'm told this in like 95, 96, okay, 1995 or 96, right? Over what, going on 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm told that back in around 1959, that the military and scientists had discovered a huge hole in Antarctica. When they explored this hole, they found massive machinery, this technology, giant machines that was very, very old, and it freaked them out. Okay. And then Eddie was sent to this because of his specialty, and something happened to him while he was there that left him catatonic, and they thought he had completely lost his mind, and he was never going to come out of it. So due to the nature of his work, and it was where it was, they figured it was better to just declare him dead. But he came through, he pulled through, and they let him return, and he continued, whatever. But think about that. How familiar does that sound? I was told in 95, 96 about scientists in the military in Antarctica finding a big hole or cavern with ancient, huge technology machines and on and so forth. Well, this is the same narrative that we've been hearing the last, 12 years or so, that just recently happened. And I've said this elsewhere. I've said, I was told this same story in around 1996, and I was told it happened in around 1959. So this more recent narrative in recent years of, they found a cave in Antarctica and it freaked out the scientists, and they found, you see my point?
Are you talking about the Corey Good, the Antarctica stuff?
Oh, Corey Good, Linda Moulton Howe, all of the luminaries in the community have been, what I'm saying is that same exact basic narrative. I was told that in 96. What do I think about this? I think that this is a narrative that they bring out once in a while, maybe to test whether someone is trustworthy. Because when I was told this by my mentor, I was told, you're not to talk about this with anybody. I'm sharing it with you because your personal friend Eddie was involved in this, because, but you don't talk about this with anyone but me. And so I never talked about it, you know, until just a few years ago, because my mentor passed away before that and stuff. And I've been out since, you know, for years. And this started emerging, and I became really suspicious that this might be what we call inking the water. I was told this narrative. I was told not to say anything. Let's say they tell 20 people, okay? And then if this emerges publicly, they can trace to who ran their mouth, and then they know not to trust that person. Is that to say that there's nothing weird going on in Antarctica? No, I'm not saying that, because I think there's sufficient weirdness been reported there and other things go on that I definitely think there's something really weird and big going on down there. Because if you just look at the luminaries, remember the very famous episode of, what was it, election night 2016, I think, is when John Kerry goes down to Antarctica on election. Yeah. And you had Buzz Aldrin in his weird comment and
whatever. And yeah,
you had the Eastern Orthodox version of the Pope. I forget what he's, go down there. I mean, what the heck is going on in Antarctica? You know, it may not be exactly what the popular narrative is, but there's something weird going on. But that's the story you're referring to. Is
yes, and that's interesting for a whole host of reasons. Gosh, we're closing in on time, and I want to make sure we get to your Sonora conference. We're just gonna I have to have you on again, Walter, because like,
okay, absolutely,
fantastic. It's always fantastic having you on. Gosh, there's so many threads I want to pull there, but it's limited time. So focusing, which one of those do you want to explore? Yeah, well, real quick, I'm just curious. This is a total derailment, not what I was planning on talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Do you allow for the possibility, like for me, flat Earth, get the hell out of here. That's trash. The motion of the planets, it doesn't work. Like,
agreed. Yeah, it's nonsense.
So I'm just gonna throw it in the trash. What I am open to is that flat Earth may be a distraction from the possibility that we live on a tube toroid, and that our planet is toroidal in shape, and that it either has massive honeycomb chambers and ancient tunnel systems that perhaps even connect continents under the ocean, that level, the kind of like sea tunnel that we talked about in part one, that it's much more honeycomb than we're aware of, or even up to, I'm open to, that the reason that they guard the poles so fervently, because it's not just Antarctica, which makes sense, right? It's a continent, they might have a civilization, who knows, technology. But the North Pole is weirder for me because there isn't actually a continuous landmass there.
Right.
So why did they guard it so heavily to where you can't fly over it? You'll be intercepted by jets. Do you allow for the possibility of the apocryphal story of Admiral Byrd saw openings at the poles? Do you think that's even possible from like a physics standpoint? And I mean, it's okay.
Oh, well, physics, you could argue, yes, because nature is full of hollow spheroids. Okay. You know, so yeah, you have to consider that. I personally love the idea of something under our feet. Here's the thing. I'm convinced to this extent. There is something about the physical makeup, the physical constitution of this planet, that there is some secret they're keeping about our cavern systems.
Yeah.
Big time on the caverns. Big time on the cavern systems. Yep. And also what's under the seas. So what I think is there's enough there in that it certainly has lent to the idea of like what you're talking about. So in other words, if what you're saying isn't exactly 100% accurate, there there are reasons why you're considering it, because there's things about this planet that lend to the idea of, you know, what you just put forth. So I think it's worth, here's why it's worth consideration, because what we will learn about what it really is. Yeah, I agree. There's something they're keeping secret at the North Pole beyond just a military presence that started in the Cold War. There's something going on there. There's obviously something in Antarctica that they're keeping from us that, you know, would upset. I think the first thing I think it would upset the perception of human history that they would prefer. And that gets into what we didn't get onto, which was the Rama Empire and all that, which we can talk about next time. In other words, that human civilization, advanced civilization, is much older on this planet than we're allowed to suppose or believe, in at least in Western civilization. And I do think that there's something to these submarine caverns off of, you know, California that we talked about. Going back to the caverns, there's something between the stuff, again, I was told by a mentor, which is just hearsay to you folks. I've got no proof or evidence. All I can do is share with you things I was told, you know, based on, you know, questions I asked. I think there's some secret about the cavern systems, you know, around the globe. And I think there's, I like to think that there's something to the stories of these tunnels. I mean, a guy I know who I'm having on my Walter Bosley channel tomorrow afternoon, David Hatcher Childress. I've known him for over 20 years, and we talked years ago. He wrote about this. He's been in the cavern in South St. Thomas. I can never pronounce it. It's Portuguese. I apologize. It's St. Thomas of the letters. And he's seen that himself, and he's talked to the military guys who explored it further. So there's something to do with these tunnels. So I think there's something to it that makes it worth consideration and further investigation.
Yeah, I mean, I think honeycomb Earth seems to me like that's absolutely certain that there is extensive tunnel systems. And I mean, you can just look at, like, in not Göbekli Tepe, gosh, what is that in Turkey? The place that has those, like, fairy chimney things, Cappadocia. Turkey, they found that very extensive tunnel system that they think, you know, Graham Hancock talked about it on his Netflix special, that could house like something absurd, like 20,000 people, which is massive in the time frame that they claim it was created, which I don't buy at all. I believe it's much older, right? And then you have the Hopi. The Hopi and Tibetans have certain linguistic similarities that are very difficult to explain, based on, even if you talk about someone coming over in the ship, why would you settle in the desert Southwest when you could settle on the shores of California?
Yeah, a good book that's an intro to that, folks, if you've never heard of it, it's a short book by a guy named Gene Matlock titled The Last Book on Atlantis You'll Ever Need to Read, or something like that. And he talks about the Vedic thematic associations to the Hopi culture.
Yeah, and so, like, the Hopi have Vedic elements. They also have Tibetan elements. And there's the Mayans and the Hopis and the Tibetans all talk about that they came up out of underground places. And if you go with the Graham Hancock theory, whether you believe it's the and I do think that there's better evidence for the cosmic debris angle, the comet, you know, that is the best explanation for the Younger Dryas that's currently trotted out. I don't buy any of the nonsense mainstream stuff. Is garbage. It's much weaker, in my opinion. I do allow for micronova, Robert Schoch opinion, you know, with the vitrification. There's that stick man on stone, the electric universe stuff. All of that, I think, has some it's worth exploring, like you just said. But the point is that I'm certain as we can be about any of this stuff, but I'm as certain as I can be about on something to where, like, the evidence is never going to be substantial until we get cooperation, forced or otherwise, from the, you know, air quotes, the powers that be, about this chapter of human history that we call Atlantis and the Great Deltas and all that stuff. But what I'm convinced of is there have been cataclysms that have driven people underground. Now, if people have been driven underground and are even have had to do so cyclically because of, as not Graham Hancock, but I forget that other guy with the big beard. I can't think what his name is.
Randall Carlson?
Randall Carlson, right. If Randall Carlson's theory, which is really fascinating from a Vedic, when I talk about the Yuga systems and the great year, the way that Randall Carlson's theory aligns perfectly with the fixed signs and the way the fixed signs come up again and again, like the cherubim angels appear as like they have the face of a man, which is Aquarius. They have the eagle, which is ancient Scorpio. They have the bull, which is Taurus, and they have the lion, which is Leo. The Sphinx facing a lion. I'm trying to wrap up because I know you got to go in a second. I do too. But there's so much stuff about the fixed signs in particular that seems to match up with what Randall Carlson is saying. It seems to match up with the Yuga system and what Bibudev Mizra, who is coming on my show sometime here in the month of August, to where I think that this happens periodically, these cataclysms. There could be an existent currently civilization of humans that's underground that may even dominate the above world civilization. If it's contiguous and continuous, right, whether it's hollow earth or honeycomb earth, it doesn't kind of matter. There could be a civilization underground that manipulates the surface reality, or there could merely be cavern systems that show this multiple antediluvian high-tech civilizations clearly existed, even if it gets abandoned periodically, because who wants to live underground when you could live on the surface?
Right. Or a remnant number of, a representative remnant number of that past civilization has remained down there.
Yeah, it could be, and there was talk, and then I do want to hit the Sonora right before we go. There was rumors that in Afghanistan that, and this is, I happen to think that there's something to the whole giants thing, that there's like some other humanoid species of giants that was on.
That intrigues me. You can't believe all the stories that you hear, obviously, but to me, there's some nugget there that makes it worth paying attention to.
I agree, and I just found out about this Aztec codice where they show them killing a giant on this codice that's reemerged from the Vatican. I just found out about this. I'm going to also do giants on this channel in more depth. That's a tough thread to pull, and it's weird to me why they would hide this. That's the part I can't quite wrap my mind around.
Well, it all goes back to the stuff that they want to hide from the masses. It's those driving Western civilization. The Vatican was a big part of that. I'm no fan of them.
Yep. And so, Walter, just in the interest of time, gotta have again, and we can talk about all this.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
The Sonora, I don't even remember the correct title for it. You're hosting a conference, and can you tell about it? You want it to be affordable. I'm hoping to go to that.
Yeah, it's called the NIMSACon.
That's
NIMSA
right.
conference, NIMSACon, and you can see the link to get tickets at walterbosley.com. And I'm going to be talking about it on my live stream, but basically, there's the Sonora Aero Club and the mysterious writings of Charles Delshow, and he's the original source that we have of the Sonora Aero Club and the mysterious group NIMSA, NYMZA, which I have written a bit about and extrapolated, hypothetically, taking it further. But you can read the works of Dennis Crenshaw, Tim Schwartz, Michael Busby, and others, and you can learn all about Charles Delshow and the Sonora Aero Club. But the NIMSACon is going to present. It's going to take place in the stomping grounds of the Sonora Aero Club in Sonora, California, at the Best Western, the weekend of October 13th through 15th. And we have a full day of lectures with Seshari, Olaf Phillips, myself, and remotely via stream will be Joseph Farrell. And we're working on a fifth speaker as well. And that's on the Saturday. On the Sunday, we're doing a full tour of all the sites that Delshow associated with the mysterious Sonora Aero Club. Okay, that's old Jamestown, that's old Sonora, and historic Columbia. Up in the gold country of California, just on the western edge of Yosemite National Park. And this will be interesting to those of you who follow the Missing 411 work by David Paulides. And the Sechery presentation will involve his analysis that he's done for years of the telluric current ley line grid, you know, all over the place, but specifically in that area. And he has identified, you know, what very possibly contributed to some of the missing 411 folks who have disappeared out of Yosemite National Park. So you'll get, you know, that too, that presentation. But it's going to be a lot of fun. We have wanted to, I've wanted to do a conference that doesn't cost an arm and a leg to either put on or attend. I've always felt like these things have gotten big and expensive and out of control. I mean, the money people spend to go to, you know, a lot of these conferences, even ones that don't seem like they're big. Well, this one, you know, we're trying to keep it, you know, intimate enough to where you feel like you got personal interaction with the folks, you know, that are the authors and researchers that you'll meet there. And again, it's only $45 to participate, you know, in the 3 days of events. The Friday night, we're having a meet and greet gathering, you know, the night before it starts. All you got to do is get yourself there, lodge yourself, feed yourself, but to participate in the events and see the lectures and stuff, only $45. You can't beat that for what you're going to get, you know, the lecturers and the information, and you'll get to hobnob with us. You get to hang out with us the Friday night and the Saturday night. You know, we're not the type that we withdraw to our fancy hotel rooms. You know, no, you'll get to interact with us. You know, maybe more than you want to.
Well, I hope to go physically for that. I hope to go there, you know, and to be able to physically meet you right in person, because we've talked a few times and texted some, but I would love to be able to shake your hand and just say, you know, it's a pleasure to meet you, Walter.
Well, that's thank you. I appreciate that. And that's the thing I love about conferences is you do get to meet these, you know, the people that whose books you've read or you've seen, you know, talking about things, and you get that personal experience and interaction, and you know, it's different than doing everything online, right? And so this is what you know, what we're looking forward to. And again, we're trying to keep it as affordable as possible, you know, because right now things are tight for everybody, I think. And so I think it's cool to offer something that is so affordable. So check it out at walterbosley.com.
And just real quick, I want to plug a couple of Walter's books that I love. Origin, which goes into NIMSA. There's one of Charles Delshaw's drawings. You know, it talks about all kinds of crazy ancient history stuff.
There's Colonel Samuel Tillman, who DJ talks about a lot.
This one right here?
Yes.
Tillman? Yeah. And so fantastic, incredible book, just absolutely incredible. And then I just have started this, and this is part of Secret Missions.
Yes,
Walter's incredible series about like a series of secret missions by British and other intelligence throughout the Americas that are fascinating, and I'll tie into the figure of Hecate correct me if I'm wrong. Correct. And one thing about Walter's books we talked about beforehand is they all come together, Marvel Universe style, dare I say, to bring a comic.
Yeah. There we go again with that. Yeah, but you're right.
Threads come together, and so.
Well, real quick, one of those, all my books all of them are connected primarily by two threads. One thread is Hecate, the presence of the goddess Hecate, and things, or symbolism and stuff. The other thread is this mysterious culture of beings known as the Tuatha De Danann.
Oh yeah.
And if there's any civilization hiding amongst us that you were talking about earlier, my money is on the Tuatha De Danann.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when you consider, I've written a book about Disneyland and its esoteric engineering. I've written a book about occult murder. I've written 3 books about occult murder in the Empire of the Whale trilogy. I've written the Secret Missions series. I've written you know, what appears to be a diverse and it is a diverse spectrum of topics. Why is it that they all tie together through Hecate and the Tuatha Dé Danann? That's a question that haunts me. Even when I'm not looking for it, it turns up in research on a book that I'm doing.
I'm gonna have to, like, I gotta dive into your secret missions books now. I've seen you do interviews on it, and just it's boggled my mind. But yeah, go to Nimzicon and get to meet Walter, and perhaps I hope to be there. There's some family things that might prevent me from being able to do that, but I hope to be there myself, and you know, you get to meet.
I hope to see you there. That'd be great.
But I'm not a speaker, but I will be an enthusiastic attendee. And
you'll be a special. We'll have you be a special guest. We'll make you stand up and introduce you, and
awesome.
You know,
that
there
would
you
be
go.
Amazing. I would love that. Well, that's even more incentive to go. So, gosh, I hate to end this conversation because it's been so brilliant, but I think this is probably a good place to tie it off. And I'll have to have you back, Walter. Hopefully faster than the last turnaround of 8 or 9 months, maybe a couple, 3 months. But yeah, and I think we'll end it there. And thank you, everyone, for coming and joining us again once more on White Lotus of Light. And see you next time. Bye.